So, have you ever wondered what holds a country together? What the ultimate rule book is? Today, we're going to dive into one of the most important documents any nation can have, its constitution. And we'll be looking at it through the lens of Namibia's own constitution to really get a feel for how a single document can shape, well, pretty much everything.
But before we get into the details, let's just imagine something for a second. What if there were no rules at all? No laws, no guidelines, nothing to protect us. It's a recipe for chaos, right? Just total discord where might makes right and there are zero consequences. And that exact scenario is why a country desperately needs an ultimate rulebook.
For Namibia, that rulebook is its constitution. It was officially adopted on March 21, 1990, the exact same day Namibia became an independent nation after a very long, hard struggle. So you can see, this wasn't just some legal document, it was the birth certificate of a new country, designed from the ground up to be the supreme law of the land.
So what does supreme law actually mean in practice? Well, think of it as the ultimate measuring stick. Every single law passed, every action taken by the government, even by an individual, has to measure up to the Constitution. And if it doesn't, if there's a conflict, the Constitution always wins. That other law or action is just invalid. It's the framework that keeps everyone and everything in check.
First off, the Constitution declares Namibia a sovereign state. That means the nation is its own boss. It governs itself, makes its own decisions about its own territory, and is totally free from outside control. For a country with a history of being ruled by others, that's an incredibly powerful statement to make right from the get-go.
Next up, it establishes the nation as secular. Now, this is a huge deal. It means the government doesn't pick a favorite religion. There's no state-endorsed faith, which guarantees that every single citizen has the freedom to believe or not believe whatever they choose without the state getting involved.
And then, of course, the big one, democratic. This principle puts the power right where it belongs, in the hands of the people. Citizens get to choose their leaders through free and fair elections. You have to remember, after decades of a system where most people had absolutely no say, this was a complete game changer. It means the government ultimately has to answer to the people it serves.
And finally, the Constitution sets up a unitary state. What that basically means is that Namibia is one single, indivisible nation. The Constitution applies equally to everyone, everywhere within its borders, no matter who you are or where you're from. It was a clear rejection of the old policies that tried to divide people up.
Okay, so we've got these big foundational principles, but how does the Constitution actually organize the country day to day? Well, it lays out a detailed blueprint for power, carefully setting up the government structure and, just as importantly, how to keep that power from being abused.
It all comes down to a classic idea called the separation of powers. It's broken into three branches. You have the legislature, they're the ones who make the laws. Then there's the executive, whose job it is to implement and enforce those laws. And finally, you have the judiciary, the courts, who interpret the laws. The whole point is to make sure no single part of the government gets too powerful. It's a system of checks and balances.
Now, to really get how massive this was, you have to look at what came before 1990. Back then, the system was one of parliamentary sovereignty. That meant whatever law Parliament passed was absolute, period, even if it was deeply unjust. But after 1990, that all changed to constitutional supremacy. Now the Constitution itself is the highest power in the land, meaning any unfair law can and will be struck down.
All right, all this talk about government structure can feel a little abstract, right? So let's bring it down to earth with a really powerful and personal example: the rights of children. This is where you can see the Constitution's power to protect the most vulnerable members of society in crystal clear detail.
The Constitution basically acts as a shield for every child. It guarantees these fundamental rights that, honestly, many of us might take for granted. Things like the right to have a name and a nationality, the right to be cared for by their parents, and the right to live free from discrimination. It also explicitly protects them from things like neglect and the horrors of war.
Take Article 15, for instance. This one is super specific. It directly protects kids from being forced into exploitative labor. It ensures they have the right to actually be children instead of being forced to work.
And then you have Article 20. And honestly, this one is a game changer. It guarantees every single child the right to an education, and it makes primary school mandatory and free. That's not just a policy, it's a constitutional promise of opportunity for everyone.
Okay, so we have all these amazing protections written down. But what happens if someone, or even the government, actually breaks these rules? Because a rule book is only as good as its enforcement, right? Well, the Constitution has a plan for that too.
The key word here is unconstitutional. If any action goes against what the Constitution says, it's declared unconstitutional. And that word has some serious teeth. It means that action is legally void. It's invalid. It has no effect.
So there are two main ways this plays out. If it's the government that's breaking the rules, say they stop providing free primary education, citizens can take them to court, all the way up to the High or Supreme Court. And if it's an individual breaking the rules, like someone illegally using child labor, they can face criminal charges or a civil lawsuit. The system holds everyone accountable from the top down.
Okay, one last thing we need to clear up, and it's a really important one. What's the difference between the Constitution itself and all the other regular laws, which are known as legislation?
The easiest way to think about this is like building a house. The Constitution is the foundation. It's solid, it sets the broad, unshakable principles, and it is the supreme law. Legislation, on the other hand, is the rest of the building, the walls, the rooms, the windows. These are the specific rules for daily life, like the Labor Act, and they're passed by Parliament. But, and this is the key, they must always be built on top of that constitutional foundation. They can't contradict it.
And you know that foundation, it's built to be rock solid for a reason. While Parliament can change a regular law pretty easily, amending the Constitution is designed to be very, very difficult. It takes a special 2/3 majority vote. And that's on purpose. It makes sure the country's core values are stable and can't be changed just because of shifting political winds.
You know, there's a quote from a major Namibian legal case that just sums this all up perfectly. It says, "The Constitution is more than just law. It's a nation's commitment to liberty and the rule of law. It's not just a rule book, it's a promise a nation makes to its people about freedom, about justice, and about the idea that nobody is above the law."
And that really leaves us with this one big question to think about. How incredible is it that a single document written with so much intention can lay out the entire blueprint that shapes the daily lives, protects the rights, and guides the future of a whole country? It's a powerful thought and definitely something worth reflecting on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.